Chapter 4: Croquet Disaster. Todd's face grew redder and his breath came hard. He just felt so upset with his little sister, he couldn't stand it. How could she hurt an innocent little animal, anyway? How would she like it if some huge creature mistreated her? Finally, he gave her a big push, and she fell to the floor. She lay there for a moment, her blue eyes wide, then started to cry. I didn't want Thor to feel left out, she sobbed. Everyone else was playing April Fools, and I didn't want him to feel bad. Mom pulled the little girl onto her lap. I understand why you did it, Molly, she said in a loving voice, but you shouldn't have. Animals don't understand games or tricks. It probably won't make Thor sick, but you're just a little girl and can't be sure about these things. Tell her she can never touch Thor again, Todd yelled. Ever! He rushed into the bathroom with the kitten, slamming the door as hard as he could. Setting the cat on the counter, he pulled out a clean washcloth and soaked it with warm water. He scrubbed the kitten's face carefully several times, but the kitten looked just as blue when he finished as when he started. When Molly finally ran off to play, Mom called Todd. Your kitten is a seal point Siamese, she said. Then she chuckled. You can look at Thor now and have an idea how he'd look if he were a blue point. She laughed out loud as if she pulled an April Fool's trick herself. That night, Mom called Todd into her room after Molly had fallen asleep. Thor's all right, she said. He'd have been sick by now if the food coloring had affected him. Good, Todd said. Molly's the worst brat I ever saw. Mom shook her head. No, she isn't. Then she smiled at him. I've always thought the worst brats slam doors. Molly's just trying to grow up, Todd. She didn't want to hurt Thor, and if you had quietly explained why she shouldn't have messed with his food, she'd have understood her error just as well. Usually you can teach people without making them feel bad. Her eyes rolled toward the ceiling. Or get physical. That's never right, and it's against the rules in this house. But I'm going to let you decide how to make it right. The next day after school, Molly told Todd she was sorry she had messed up Thor's face. I promise I'll never do anything bad to him again, she said, crossing her heart on her chest. Thanks, Todd said. I'm sorry I pushed you. I shouldn't have. Trying to treat you better, he grinned. It's hard, but really am trying. After supper that night, Molly edged up to Todd. She held a tiny pair of blue pajamas in her hand. Would it hurt Thor if I dressed him in doll clothes? She asked. Todd raised his eyebrows at Mom. Mom smiled. The clothes won't hurt him if they're not too small, but you might hurt him putting them on. Molly brought the pajamas to Mom. You show me how. Mom took the kitten in the pajamas. They'll fit fine, she said. Then she started carefully pulling them over Thor's feet. The main thing is never bend his legs back. Just hold the clothes below his normal leg position and slip them over. Animals' legs won't bend out as humans' arms do. She finished snapping the tiny garments over the kitten's back and set him on the floor. The kitten stood on 4 feet a moment, then fell over on his side on the carpet. Everyone laughed. Todd put him on his feet again. Thor fell again. Leave him alone, Dad whispered. He'll figure out he's okay. Thor lay flat for a few moments and then gathered himself together and stood up. He looked so long and skinny and funny in the clothes that everyone burst into laughter. Thor raised his head high and ran across the room. When he reached Todd, he stopped, took one last look at his pajamas, and jumped into Todd's lap. Curling himself into a little ball, he fell asleep. Molly gently took off the pajamas so Thor could sleep better. Thor interrupted worship that night, meowing loudly. Todd went after the cat and tucked him over his shoulder. Thor seemed delighted, but soon slipped away and started his yowling again. Todd found him on the bed and brought him back to the living room, where Dad waited patiently to continue the story from the primary treasure. After a third time, Dad asked Todd what was going on. He wants to go to bed, Todd said. He doesn't know he can go alone. Well, Dad said, I've never heard such a horrible sound. I have, Mom said. All Siamese cats howl like that, Dad. You may as well get used to it. Thor will get it down pat one of these days. And people a block away will hear. She smiled at Todd. Some people refuse to have Siamese cats because they can't stand their yowling. Dad grinned and put his hands over his ears. I might be one of them, he said. Go put him in your room, Todd, and shut the door so we can finish worship. Now I know why his name's Thor, Molly said, laughing. He's louder than thunder. One evening after supper, the family decided to play a game of croquet. Thor followed them into the backyard and chased small insects he found in the lawn. Don't let him eat those bugs, Molly screamed when she noticed. Todd grinned. He had been watching and felt certain Thor wouldn't eat the bugs. What's the matter, Molly? He asked. Don't you know that bugs have a lot of protein? After Molly figured out the cat wasn't eating anything gross, she and Todd started setting up wickets and stakes. Then they all chose their mallets and balls. Molly chose red because red plays first. Todd chose yellow so he could play second. The object of the game is to knock the balls across the lawn, through the wickets to the stakes at the end. Then you do the same backward. The first one back to the beginning wins the game. Molly knocked her ball through two wickets, screaming with delight. When she tried again, the ball missed the wicket and rolled past. Then Todd put his ball through the first two and also the next. Mom and Dad took their turns, but both missed. Then Molly played again and caught up with Todd. In fact, her ball touched his. I'm gonna knock his ball out of the lawn, Molly said, wearing a big grin. Dad shook his head. Better not. He might do it to you, and you'll cry. In croquet, if your ball touches another, you can put your foot on your ball and then hit your own ball. It makes the other ball fly away. Molly laughed. He won't catch me. Then she put her foot on her ball and hit it so hard as she could. Todd's yellow ball jumped 10 feet across the lawn, right into Thor's little black face. The kitten slumped to the ground. Molly dropped her mallet and ran to the quiet kitten. I've killed Thor, she screamed. I've killed our very first little kitty.